Yes, this is perfect. We can't see your screen.
We can see it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, who will be also sharing screen? Everybody?
Yasmin?
Yes, for
Nuran?
me, it says host disabled participant screen sharing.
Okay, let me do it for you. Okay, can you try it now?
Yes, it's working.
Okay.
Thank you.
Then we also have
I
Nuran.
think we need to be co-hosts to be able to share
Yes,
screen.
I just changed Nuran also to co-host to
Then we have Mr. Ahmed Yusuf.
okay, for Mr. Ahmed it's also done.
And Mohammed Khashashne.
Yes. Okay.
And
Khaled,
and
you will be
Dustin.
presenting. Dustin? No. Okay. Khaled.
Very good. Yeah, it works. I think that's it. Heba, I'm assuming that just one of you will be controlling the presentation, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Can you see now?
Yes, we can see Mr. Ahmed's presentation. Thank you, it's clear.
Okay, for now we have 10 attendees connected.
Oh, you mean?
Yeah, thank you so
audio.
much. Let me share the screen and then start.
No, sorry, Mr. Ahmed, this is just a test. So as long as you have that ability, the panelists are actually, the webinar hasn't been opened yet. I just wanted to sort of invite everyone to this preparatory session to do the sound check, to do the video check, and also introduce the speakers to our interpreters, who you can see at the bottom there. So once again, a very warm welcome to all of you, and thank you so much for having agreed to participate in this special session. Because it's a special session, we are going to sort of minimize the formalities once we start the session, largely because we have a very limited amount of time. It's an hour and a half. But the aim of the session is to really give the participants a snapshot, really, of the way in which climate security discussions, discourse, research, and initiatives are actually taking place in the region, because it's a relatively new area of work. So I will have to be extremely strict with the time. So please forgive me already if I interrupt you and ask you to sort of wrap up towards the end of your allocated time, but that's the only way we'll be able to sort of get through it. At the moment, we've got approximately 130 participants who've registered. Assuming that not all of them come, we may have, you know, probably around 70, maybe a bit more as well. Usually there's people who sign up but don't necessarily take part, which is still a very good number in terms of the audience that we're trying to reach out to. The way we've structured the session is there are going to be some interactive questions for which we're using a software. And it's pretty straightforward. The link will be shared in the chat box. So all of the participants will have, you know, we'll just need to click on it. You will see it as well. It's a way to engage with the audience. So that's what we've got planned. And then they may also pose questions to you in that chat box. So it will be great if you, as a panelist, as someone who's just spoken, if you would like to respond, and I do encourage you to kind of interact, please do so by putting it in the chat box. I would like to welcome Dr. Mohammed Khashashne. Welcome, Excellency, to the session. Can you hear me? You're on mute. We cannot hear you. Dr. Khashashne?
I hear that. I hear my name. That's right.
Yes, it was just to welcome you, sir. Good morning.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good morning for everybody, and happy to be part of this session, and happy to communicate with this gentlewoman and gentleman.
Likewise, thank you very much for your time. We were just going through sort of the.
By the way, excuse me. By the way, Dr. Nidal is communicating with me, and he is very nice person. This is this is very fair. I need to mention this in the front of the panel. Thank you, Dr. Nidal. I don't know whether he is hearing me or not.
No, that's a very
Excuse me, Sujala.
Yeah. Yes, Anas.
I think one of our panelists had started the webinar.
What do you mean?
Because it's already recording on my screen. Zaid, can you please advise on that?
Yes, the webinar has started. I don't know who started it from his side, but I think this is we can't stop it anymore.
Okay, so we're live.
Yeah.
So can we see the participants, Zaid?
Yes, we can see there's 16 participants till now.
I have 32 participants, 16 attendees, 16 panelists.
Yes.
Okay, well, let's give everyone a few minutes, more participants to join in, and then we can go ahead and get started. It's still a few minutes away from the official start time, so. Good morning, Sabah Khair, dear participants, and a very warm welcome to this special session on the SDG Climate Security Nexus here in the Arab States. My name is Sujala Pant, and I am the Chief Technical Advisor and Project Manager on a multi-partner project that addresses this very issue here in the region. And I'm delighted to be your moderator here today. Before going into the specifics of the presentation, I would just like to make a few housekeeping notes. We have Arabic and English translation today, so at the bottom of your screen, you should be able to choose your language of choice. So please do make use of that if it's something that you require. And also to make a note that we have tried to make this session as interactive as we can. And so throughout the discussion, please feel free to type in your questions, reflections in the chat box. And if you're trying to get a response from a specific speaker, please do not hesitate to point them out as well. In addition to that, we have some interesting interactive exercises which we will walk you through as we progress throughout the session. And if at any point you have any issues, please do type that into the chat box and one of my colleagues will be able to assist you. So let us get started because we do have a very limited amount of time today. Today we're exploring the impacts of climate security on the achievement of the SDGs in the region. What this means is the convergence of multiple risks and challenges in the region have created a situation where existing vulnerabilities and fragile situations can worsen. And where social and economic inequalities are rising. And all of these are creating bottlenecks or are slowing down progress towards achieving the SDGs, in addition to the recent pandemic, of course, and the effects of that. So to help us get started on this issue, I'm honored to welcome Her Excellency Nada Al-Ghizi and Mr. Khalid Abdel Shafi to share some initial remarks. Mr. Khalid Abdel Shafi is currently the director of the UNDP Regional Hub in Amman. Please, Khalid, over to you.
Thank you so much, Sujal, and dear Dr. Nada Al-Ghizi, good to see you again and good to be together in this session. Distinguished guests and panelists, colleagues and friends, this special session, as you know, will shed the light on what climate security means in and for the Arab region, with some tangible examples from ongoing work to address climate security challenges and hopefully convince more of you to join forces with us and our partners to address the issue at hand. As you all know, dear colleagues, our region is affected severely by climate change impacts, with the fastest rise in temperatures, as you know. Today, the Arab region is the most water scarce also region in the world, and the Arab states represent 14 of the world's 20 most water-stressed countries worldwide. And this is according to a recent UNDP study. The 2019 ESCWA report reveals that 38% of the Arab population live in countries with absolute water scarcity. Likewise, when it comes to food security, which is another challenge, as you know, a 2019 WFP report states that more than half of all food insecure people around the world are located in fragile contexts or countries affected by crisis. And we are seeing this, this fact in front of our eyes when we look at countries like Yemen or Syria, where malnutrition and severe hunger is a sad reality that we are seeing every day. As a result of these conflicts, the number of displaced people and refugees in the region is also extremely high, with approximately 30 million people. This creates its own, of course, set of specific needs, challenges, and priorities. Ladies
Vous
and
êtes
gentlemen,
actuellement le seul participant de la conférence.
these are only, I don't know what this intervention was. These are only some examples that illustrate how climate change can exacerbate existing socio-economic tensions and trigger conflict, force displacements, and threaten to reverse important gains in sustainable development. You may ask at this stage how this relates to climate security, and I want to put special emphasis on the complexity of interlinked challenges threatening the societies we live in today. The combined effect of unequal access to basic needs, underlying inequalities, and insufficient ability of governments to respond can lead to disastrous outcomes, not only in terms of creating social tensions, but also directly affecting the achievements of SDGs. As you know, we will hear more about this in today's event, where the diversity of the discussion topics reflect the complexity of the climate security challenge, requiring us all to work together to identify tailored climate security solutions for communities in both rural and urban contexts, and by strengthening partnerships across government, private sector, and civil society organizations. I'm really delighted that we can take advantage of a distinguished set of senior leaders from governments and experts from regional and international organizations to unpack what climate security entails and how those considerations can be mainstreamed in relevant processes, strategies, policies, so that we can all work towards achieving the SDGs in a durable and risk-resilient manner. Allow me, before passing the microphone, I'd like to take this opportunity really to thank our dear colleagues at the League of Arab States, the Arab Water Council, World Food Programme, Europe Finance Initiative, UNDRR, and UN Habitat for their cooperation on the SDG Climate Facility project that is actually bringing us together today. Finally, and last but not least, my sincere thanks goes to the government of Sweden, represented by SIDA, for their critical support, without which the progress made so far towards addressing climate security in the Arab region would not have been possible. I wish you a successful event and interesting discussions, and looking forward to that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Khalid, for helping us to situate the challenges in the regional context. I would now like to move straight over to Dr. Nada for her initial remarks. The floor is yours, please.
Thank you, Sujala, and good morning, everyone. Good morning, Khalid. Very happy to be here with you today. But allow me to give my opening remarks in Arabic. السيد خالد عبد الشافي مدير المركز الإقليمي للدول العربية ببرنامج الأمم المتحدة الإنمائي، السادة ممثلي الدول العربية، السيدات والسادة شركائنا المميزين من الجهات الدولية والإقليمية، صباح الخير جميعا. يسعدني أن أرحب بكم في هذه الجلسة المتخصصة الهامة والتي تبحث في موضوع الأمن المناخي وتأثيراته على تنفيذ أهداف التنمية المستدامة ضمن فعاليات المنتدى العربي للتنمية المستدامة، والتي يأتي انعقادها في وقت يشهد ظروف استثنائية بسبب ظهور جائحة كورونا وتداعياتها على جميع دول العالم. وستمثل جلسة اليوم خلال أعمال المنتدى فرصة سانحة لاستعراض آثار مخاطر الأمن المناخي على تنفيذ أهداف التنمية المستدامة في المنطقة العربية. السيدات والسادة، بالرغم من أن موضوع التغير المناخي قد خصص له هدف كامل ضمن أهداف التنمية المستدامة نظراً لأهميته، إلا أن علاقة المناخ بجميع أهداف التنمية المستدامة والترابط الموجود فيما بينها والتي تمس الفرد مباشرة جعل هذه القضية تحظى بأولوية قصوى على أجندة أولويات المجتمع الدولي. ولقد أولت جامعة الدول العربية اهتماماً كبيراً بهذا الموضوع ووضعته ضمن أولوياتها، وكانت أولى الخطوات ما اتخذته اللجنة العربية للتنمية المستدامة من خطوات قمنا خلالها بالتعاون مع الشركاء الدوليين والإقليميين ومنظمات المجتمع المدني لإنشاء مرفق المناخ لتحقيق أهداف التنمية المستدامة، العمل المناخي من أجل العمل البشري، والذي يهدف إلى تعزيز قدرة المؤسسات الإقليمية والوطنية والمحلية على إدماج اعتبارات تغير المناخ بشكل فعال في سياسات التنمية ومنع الأزمات وتحقيق الانتعاش بعد الصدمات، ودعم توسيع نطاق التمويل المتعلق بتأثير المناخ من أجل إيجاد حلول محلية مبتكرة، بالإضافة إلى معالجة القضايا المترابطة من أجل تحقيق مستوى أفضل للأمن المناخي. وقد بدأنا بالفعل خطوات التنفيذ لهذا المرفق. كما ساهم المرفق بشكل رئيسي وبالتعاون مع جامعة الدول العربية وبرنامج الأمم المتحدة للبيئة مبادرة التمويل في إصدار تقرير بعنوان تعزيز التمويل المستدام والتمويل المناخي في المنطقة العربية، والذي يعد أول تحليل متعمق لممارسات التمويل المستدام في المنطقة العربية الأكثر عرضة لتأثيرات تغير المناخ، ويتطرق إلى التعامل مع تحديات المياه والطاقة والغذاء وترابطها كأمر أساسي لبناء اقتصادات مرنة في هذه المنطقة. ويخلص التقرير إلى أن اعتماد ممارسات التمويل المستدام يمكن أن يوفر العديد من الفوائد للمؤسسات المالية مع إمكانية أوسع للحصول على تمويل للمجتمعات المعرضة للتأثر بتغير المناخ. السيدات والسادة، اتخذت كذلك اللجنة العربية للتنمية المستدامة خطوة هامة من خلال تبنيها لإعداد تقرير حول أهداف التنمية المستدامة في الدول العربية المتأثرة بالنزاعات، يشمل دراسة أوضاع الدول الأعضاء التي تشهد نزاعاً والخارجة من نزاع والمتأثرة بالنزاع. وما يميز هذا التقرير أنه يتطرق إلى معظم التحديات التي تواجه الدول العربية بما في ذلك التغير المناخي، وما له من أثر على ما بين 3 إلى 20% من جميع النزاعات المسلحة خلال القرن الماضي، وهو ما أدى إلى تفاقمها وبالتالي أصبح يشكل عاملاً مضاعفاً للخطر. كما أن الشدة والوتيرة المتزايدة للكوارث المرتبطة بالمناخ في البيئات المتأثرة بالنزاعات تؤدي إلى تقويض القدرات على التكيف مع الصدمات وإدارة مخاطر الكوارث. ويتضمن التقرير العديد من أوجه أثر التغير المناخي والأمن المناخي على المنطقة العربية. ليس هناك متسع من الوقت لذكرها جميعاً الآن، إلا أننا نود أن نفيد سيادتكم علماً بأن هذا التقرير سيتم إطلاقه رسمياً خلال فعاليات النسخة الرابعة للأسبوع العربي للتنمية المستدامة، والتي ستعقد على هامش فعاليات إكسبو دبي في 2021. السيدات والسادة، يجب علينا أن نعمل على تطوير برامج حول مفهوم الأمن المناخي وارتباطه بأبعاد وأهداف التنمية المستدامة، وأن نتابع جهودنا في قضايا الأمن المناخي الشامل وإعطائها عظيم الاهتمام، وأن نخرج بالدروس المستفادة لبناء نظم أكثر مرونة وتحديد مسارات التنمية المناسبة مع الاستفادة من فرص أهداف التنمية المستدامة واتفاقية المناخ وإطار عمل سندان وغيرها من الأجندات المرتبطة بها. كما علينا أن نشجع التنسيق فيما بيننا جميعا، خاصة فيما يتعلق بالمعلومات والتمويل والمؤشرات لبناء المرونة والصمود على جميع المستويات المحلية والوطنية والإقليمية. وفي نهاية هذه الكلمة لا يسعني إلا أن أتقدم بالشكر والتقدير لكم جميعا على تواجدكم معنا اليوم، آملة أن تكون المناقشات والمداخلات ثرية وبناءة في هذه الجلسة الهامة. شكرا لكم. Over to you, Sujata. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Excellency, for your opening remarks and already indicating to us that there is a huge amount of work that's being undertaken under the leadership of the LAS, and many of which we will also have the chance to hear more about as we progress today. So we will now be moving on to the presentations, but before we do that, we would like to take a group photo while everyone is still here. And so I would like to invite everyone to please turn on their videos if your bandwidth allows it, so that we can capture this moment while everyone is still here. And hopefully it doesn't take very long. and nor my colleague will let me know once it's been taken. So all right, I believe we're done. So thank you. And before inviting the first set of speakers, we'd like to hear from you. We would like to get your perspectives on what you understand from the concept of climate security. And here I would like to invite my colleague, Dr. Tina Jakolski, to please walk us through the questions and the steps that we need to take in order for us to participate. Tina, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Sajala. Good morning, everyone. We would like to invite you to participate in a short online poll that you can access through a platform called Mentimeter, which some of you might already be familiar with. So as you're opening this link now, if I could please ask my colleagues to post it in the chat box, you will find the link in the chat box. And through that link, you can access the Mentimeter questionnaire. So in this first session, we have 2 questions. The first one is an open-ended question that allows you to type into a box. So this is kind of like to capture your opinions. Unfortunately, this is only possible in English. The second question, which you can progress to through your own at your own pace, is a multiple choice question. So I'm just seeing that there's an issue with the link, so let me just post that quickly myself. 1 second. So now you should all be seeing the link to this first activity, and you should be able to access the questions. So please, as you've submitted question 1, you can already progress through to question 2 as well.
Also, once you're done, you can go back to the Zoom link and it will enable you to see some of the responses that are happening.
Well, I'm sharing my screen right now. You should be able to see it. Just confirming that.
So I do encourage everyone to type in a few of your views, your sense and perspectives on the issue at hand. I see that we may have very limited responses so far. And of course, you know, this is an exercise to really show the breadth when we speak about climate security. So please, and these are anonymous, so do feel free to be quite honest with what you see as problems in these areas. Okay, so there's some words that you keep seeing, especially in relation to water, and of course that I think is very representative of where we are, and one of the biggest challenges in the region actually, which is exacerbated by climate change. Inequality, extreme weather events leading to droughts. There's some points here being made on policy misalignment. So it's really interesting. I mean, we will, just so you know, we will be capturing these for our own records and to really help us inform the next kind of steps as well. So do feel free to keep sending in your responses. We will have another opportunity to respond to another question as we go through the program today. But I would perhaps at this point like to move on with the presentations. But if please, by all means, do complete your responses if you haven't yet done so. Here I would now like to invite our first speaker from Somalia, Mr. Ahmed Yusuf Ahmed, who is currently the Director General at the Department of Environment in the Office of the Prime Minister in Somalia. Mr. Ahmed, the floor is yours, please. Mr. Ahmed, we cannot hear you.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, very clear.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's great pleasure to actually participate in this important meeting today. And I would like to share the preliminary to the presentation that I have already started sharing to you, which is the climate security risks. I think like in our country, Somalia. So my name is Ahmed Yusuf. I'm Director General of the Environment and Climate Change under the Office of the Prime Minister, Federal Republic of Somalia. And I think you can see the presentation and I can start.
Yes, please go ahead. You have 10 minutes.
Thank you. So the outline of this presentation is, as you can see, the outline of the key environmental and climate change, climate challenges in Somalia. Also, the number 2 is climate security nexus. What is the relationship between the climate and the security? And also number 3 is Somalia response to climate change. What is the current intervention is going to tackle this climate issue? And also there is ongoing climate security related interventions. And number 5 is conclusion and then questions and answers. So if I go directly, as you can see this presentation now, the key challenges facing in Somalia, this one is that I'm just displaying to you here. And first one, as you can see, they are interconnected. Each one is connected to another one. Let me start the poverty. Somalia, one of the key challenges now facing and caused is the climate issue is the poverty. For example, as you can see now, the poverty is it's almost something that is Somalia for the last 3 decades that we have been experiencing. And as you can see that the poverty is coming from the environmental degradation and also to the natural resources and also the climate shocks. For example, when the climate shocks and climate disasters are taking place, people are fighting and struggling to get the small resource. For example, water is one of the key factors that Somali's population are facing really when it comes to this topic. And also Somalis are depending on the animal resources. We are one of the country that has some good capital when it comes to the different animal resources like camel, like goat and so on, and also cow. So all these animal resources which Somalis are depend need is a lot of water, need is pasture, and also need is all the important things that need to be depended on. And then Somalis, they can live well. And as you can see that the poverty is one of the issues that we are facing. And why Somalis cannot challenge and tackle this issue is because of the weak institutions. As you know that Somalia is a country located in Horn of Africa, and we have a very the most actually the largest coastline in I think is it the largest coastline of in the East Africa? No, actually Africa, and also a big land, and all those things need a strong government to be to control all these things. So our problem is in 1991, the central government was collapsed, and from 1991 up to now, now almost is 30 years. Yes, we have been recovering for the last 10 years because we have now a federal government of Somalia, but the institutions are still weak. So tackling climate issues, the really need is to be have some strong institutions, those who can respond. And then when the climate shocks takes place and people they are getting buffered, and then there is a political instability, and then there is also conflict. So people are fighting the small resources like water and so on, and then they create a lot of political instability, which will become a climate security for at the end. So that's the main issue that we need to share the plenary. And then, as you can see here now, the next Somalia has observed the projected changes in the climate change. Here, the four things are very important to be known, especially in the context of Somalia. And I think that the other countries also share most of it. But in Somalia, these are what we have been observed for the last recent report shows us. As you can see here, first one is changes in surface temperature. This is one of the climate facts that we have seen, and also the second one is changes in sea surface temperature and sea levels. As you can see, this picture is now the two pictures from the left side. One is the sea coming out almost is going to cover all the houses and where people are living. So those are the sea rising levels. That's one example that you can see almost. And the other picture, which is the temperature or the air temperature, you can see that the Madam Somali mom just stay in a land where there is no tree, and the tree has been cutting because people they wanted to get charcoal trade. As you can see, that one also another picture that we can show you the facts in Somalia. And then the other one, number 3, is changes in the extreme events and changes in also in precipitation. In extreme events, we mean here drought and floods. These are common in Somalia now. Every 2 years, we get maybe floods, and then automatically then there is a drought. So those are the challenges that we are facing. And then if I go to the next climate security nexus, climate crisis, it's very big here. And if I can almost go here, in the last 3 decades, the rainfall in Somalia has been erratic and unpredictable. Since 1991, Somalia has experienced 30 climate-related hazards, 12 droughts and 18 floods. Then recurrent droughts and floods are major drivers of the displacement and also humanitarian crisis in Somalia. These have been implications for the peace, security in Somalia, loss of livelihoods, mass displacement, and competition over the scarce resources that we have. And the other one is an assessment of the climate-induced IDPs. Here you can see the most 2 factors that that our people, especially the IDPs, are caused to be the IDPs is 2 issues: flooding and drought. As you can see here, this chart, this report is coming from UNHCR in 2016 and 2020. And then if I go the next, climate security nexus, livelihood and the foundations of human security. Climate security in Somalia means enhancing the availability of the livelihood, and also these activities will contribute to the prevention of the climate tensions and reduce the illegal coping mechanism. And then Somalia response to climate change, a national adaptation program of action, NABA. We have developed national climate change policy 2020. We have developed environmental management policy. We have developed national recovery and resilience framework. We have developed a national development plan, MDB 9 2020-24. We have developed, now we are about to conclude national determinant contributions, NDCs. And then climate adaptation priority actions. These are priorities coming from the NDC. For example, functional area, food security and livelihood, promote and also disaster preparedness and management, public infrastructure, support vulnerable groups, and developing improving policies and institutions. This, for example, promote climate smart agriculture, enhance resilience of livestock, and also promote climate change resilience in the traditional and modern knowledge, and also establish effects of early warning systems and build climate security change in the resilience infrastructure, support vulnerable groups, and also build institutional capacity and enact policy and frameworks to relate climate change, adaptation, and mitigation. So ongoing climate security projects in Somalia. Somalia Climate Security Project implemented by UNDP in collaboration with the government of Somalia. It's a pilot project. It's part of the global climate security mechanism. The objectives of this project is to identify pilot local climate security solutions at the community level, develop and pilot comprehensive climate security solutions that are tailored to the climate circumstance. Outcome of this project is climate-related security risks assessed in Somalia, and also number 2 is on the ground the climate security interventions. For example, after when we see the report, maybe the end of the year, we will have some support to be invested, like water and so on. Conclusion, Somalia has made significant strides since 2012 and it is journey toward peace, security, and sustainable development. However, progress toward the 2020 agenda and sustainable development goal is very low. Instability, climatic crisis, environmental degradation, during natural resources, compound and fragile humanitarian situation, and slow progress toward 2020 agenda and SDGs. Resilience, reliance on vulnerable sectors, livestock, agriculture, increase of food insecurity, and large scale of displacement are high unemployment pose risks to peace and stability. Somalia is committed to continue its long recovery with the support of the international partners to achieve peace, security, sustainable development. So the tragedy of the communities is, for example, it's about the governance and also it's about the institutions. Mahadsanidin, thank you, shukran.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ahmed, for that very comprehensive overview. And I think your last slide that really touches on the governance dimensions, the institutions, the tragedy of the commons is a great way to capture the complexity of the issue at hand. So thank you very much for presenting Somalia's experience in also addressing and responding to these many challenges. I would invite all the attendees to please ask and raise any questions to Mr. Ahmed in the chat box for now. And Mr. Ahmed, I do encourage you also to respond to them if you're able to. And of course, to make a note that the presentations will be shared with everyone. With that, I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Mohamed Khashashne, Secretary General at the Ministry of Environment in Jordan. Dr. Khashashne, the floor is yours. You have 10 minutes, please. Thank you.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. مرة أخرى نرحب بجميع الزملاء وأنا سعيد أني أكون جزء من هذا الاجتماع. وبداية نوجه الحديث إلى السيدة ندى وسعادة السيد خالد عبد الشافي والزملاء الأعزاء من الدول العربية والزملاء من المؤسسات والمنظمات المشاركة. بداية أود أن كما أشرت في البداية أو في مرحلة التستنج الشكر للمكتب القطري لبرنامج الأمم المتحدة الإنمائي في عمان لتعاون الوثيق مع وزارة البيئة في كافة الملفات البيئية وخاصة في ملف التغير المناخي. لا أعلم إذا كانت الشاشة لديكم.
Not yet. Dr. Khashashne.
Now?
Yeah, I think it's starting now. Yes, we
الآن؟ أوكي. إذا مرة أخرى نرحب بكم أجمل ترحيب. أنا الأوردر من عندي ولا من عندكم اللي هو على النكست ستيب؟ أوكي. بداية راح يكون يتركز حديثي في هذا الموضوع الهام مرة أخرى. يعني نشكركم على هذا التنظيم وموضوع الأمن المناخي في الدول المختلفة، إذ تعتبر المملكة الأردنية الهاشمية أن هذا الموضوع في منتهى الأهمية، موضوع الأمن المناخي، وكثير من الدول المتقدمة اعتبرت أن هذا الملف وخاصة الولايات المتحدة قضية أمن قومي. فأعتقد أن كثير من البلدان ومنها وخاصة في المناطق الهشة في الأردن تعتبر هذه قضية في منتهى الأهمية، وخاصة على مختلف القطاعات التنموية. بداية أود أن أعرفكم على الإطار التنظيمي والمؤسسي الذي يتم العمل بموجبه في المملكة الأردنية الهاشمية. فكما ترون لدينا لجنة وطنية للتغير المناخي تم تشكيلها من المؤسسات المعنية بمستويات عالية على مستوى أصحاب القرار، من 17 جهة برئاسة وزير البيئة وعضوية الأمناء العامين ل 16 وزارة وبلدية كبيرة بما فيها بلدية أمانة عمان. هذه اللجنة هي تتولى حزمة من المهام التي لها علاقة بالسياسات المتعلقة في التغير المناخي سواء على المستوى المحلي أو الدولي، ومن ضمن هذه المهام اعتماد وثيقة المساهمات المحددة وطنيا للتغير المناخي وخطة التكيف الوطنية، وكل هذه الوثائق بطبيعة الحال يتم رفعها إلى مجلس الوزراء لإقرارها، إضافة إلى أنها أيضا تقوم باعتماد التقارير التي يتوجب إعدادها ضمن التزامات المملكة تجاه اتفاقية التغير المناخي. كما تقوم هذه اللجنة أي اللجنة الوطنية للتغير المناخي بتقييم متابعة تنفيذ السياسات والتشريعات المتعلقة بالمناخ في المملكة. كما تقوم أيضا باقتراح التشريعات اللازمة والمتعلقة بالتغير المناخ متضمنة أو وفقا للأولويات الوطنية والالتزامات الدولية التي توقع عليها المملكة. كما أيضا تقوم باعتماد خطط العمل وبرامج التخفيف والتكيف القطاعية لضمان تكاملية العمل مع الجهات المختلفة التي تعمل في المملكة. كما تقوم باعتماد التوصيات الاستراتيجية الوطنية للتمويل المناخي، إضافة إلى تبني التكنولوجيات الحديثة المتعلقة بتغير المناخ وفقا للاحتياجات المقترحة من الجهات ذات العلاقة. وأيضا كثير من المهام التي لها علاقة بتنفيذ هذا البرنامج الوطني والعالمي لمواجهة التغيرات المناخية. وهناك مادة بمهام هذه اللجنة مرنة بحيث أنها تقوم بأي مهام إضافية وحسب المستجدات على الساحة المحلية والدولية والتي يكلفها بها الرئيس. هذه اللجنة التوجيهية. أما اللجنة أيضا هناك لجان فنية متخصصة تشكل حسب أو قطاعية حسب المقتضى، ويشارك فيها اللي هي سواء الجهات الحكومية أو القطاع الخاص أو الجهات الأكاديمية أو البحثية، وحتى المنظمات الدولية بصفة مراقب التي قد نستعين بها بمختلف مراحل تنفيذ أي برنامج أو أي أداة أو وسيلة لتمويل أو لتنفيذ برامج على أرض الواقع أو اقتراح برامج من شأنها الحد من ظاهرة التغير المناخي. كما تعلمون أنه كمان القانون، كل هذا النظام هو مستمد من قانون حماية البيئة إصداره الأخير 2017. لدينا قانون بيئة قديم يمكن من 1995 أول قانون بيئة، ولكن التحديث الأخير ليتواكب مع المستجدات العالمية تم تحديثه في عام 2017. إضافة مش مذكور هون قدامكم أنه أصدرنا أيضا قانون خاص لإدارة النفايات، وهذا القطاع أيضا مسؤول عن انبعاثات لا بأس بها تصل إلى حوالي 14 إلى 15% من مجمل الانبعاثات. وهذا القانون يركز على تطبيق هرمية إدارة النفايات بما يتماشى مع التوجهات العالمية للحد من ظاهرة التغير المناخي. كما أشرت أن اللجنة الفنية شكلت بموجب النظام، واحنا نسمي البايلو نظام، يعني في سيستم وفي بايلو يعني باللغة العربية، بس احنا هون بنحكي عن البايلو اللي هو نظام التغير المناخي، وفي اللي هو ضمن هذا النظام، بس اللي هو حبيت اني اعرج عنها بسرعة، نقاط اتصال اللي هو يجب على 45 جهة وهي ملحقة بهذا النظام أن تحدد نقاط اتصال محلية للتواصل معهم من خلال وزارة البيئة. هذه الجهات طبعا تشمل جهات تنفيذية وجهات أخرى. طبعا كمان في أنكس كمان اللي هو أو ملحق بهذا النظام بيحدد الجهات التي يجب عليها تقديم بيانات لإعداد الجرد الوطني بشأن التغيرات المناخية. لما نتحدث احنا على الأمن المناخي والتهديدات البيئية، فلا بد انه نتحدث عن الإفراط في استغلال الموارد الطبيعية. وبطبيعة الحال يمكن بتعرفوا انه الأردن عندها موارد شحيحة جدا من المياه، فيعني شح المياه هو واحدة من أهم التحديات التي تواجه الأردن، وعملية أو ظاهرة التغير المناخي قد تفاقم هذه المشكلة. لذلك نرى أنها هذه القضية هي قضية أمن حقيقية يجب التصدي لها، إضافة إلى تدهور الأراضي والنظم البيئية. من المظاهر التي يشهدها الأردن اللي هي ولها تأثير مباشر على الأمن المائي والغذائي، مثل ما حكينا زيادة شح المياه، زيادة تكرار حالات الجفاف، زيادة عدد الفيضانات المفاجئة، زيادة تكرار العواصف الترابية، موجات الحر المتكررة، والتغيرات في استخدام أو التغييرات في استخدام الأراضي. إذن كل هذه مظاهر من مظاهر التغيرات المناخية التي يجب التصدي لها في مجال المياه. موضوع الأمن الغذائي كمان اللي هي من القضايا اللي احنا يجب أو نعطيها كبيرة، وبالفعل تم إعطائها، اللي هي الأمن الغذائي المستجيب للمناخ، حيث تم إعداد استراتيجية زراعية ذكية مناخيا للاستجابة لهذا الموضوع، وتعتمد على أنماط تكاملية في الزراعة. أحد الزملاء بيأشر لي أنه بعد لي 3 دقائق، فعشان هيك راح أستعجل شوية. فيعني بهذا الإطار أو إطار الأمن الغذائي، فبعرفش في يمكن دول ثانية زينا، بس اللي هو بالأردن إحنا نستورد حوالي 80% من احتياجاتنا الغذائية. والزراعة بالرغم أنه إحنا بنستورد 80%، إلا أن الزراعة بتستهلك 65% من موارد المياه العذبة في الأردن، وهي بتوفر هاي الزراعة 19% فقط من الموارد الغذائية، وبتوظف بس 1.8 فلذلك انه لازم انه يعني نتعاطى مع هذه المساله بطريقه مختلفه. مراعاه التغير المناخي في التخطيط الانمائي والادوات المتاحه حتى انه نواجه هذه الظاهره بالطريقه الصحيحه، وانه نحد من هذه الظاهره الخطيره على الامن بمختلف جوانبه، اللي هو مثل ما حكينا الامن المائي والغذائي والى اخره. فمن خلال اللي هي يجب ان نراعي هذا البعد في سياساتنا الوطنيه، وبالفعل تم اعداد السياسه الوطنيه للتغير المناخي والادوات اللي بتقوم بهذا التغيير اللي حكينا عنها اللجنه الوطنيه، اللي حكينا اللي هي من اصحاب قرار من 16 جهه ذات علاقه، من خلال ايضا اللي هو تعزيز قدرات المؤسسات الوطنيه والمحليه والتخطيط المتكامل اللي يجب انه يكون في سياسات تغير مناخي وخطط النمو الاخضر كلياتها انجكتد او اللي هي جزء من خططها التنمويه، حتى يكون في اللي هو ربط بين المياه والطاقه وعمليه حتى اللي هي ضخ اللي احنا بالاردن يعني بنستهلك كميات كبيره من الطاقه في ضخ المياه، فلا بد ان يكون لها يعني مصادر مستدامه اللي دائما اللي هو نحافظ على هذا المصدر ونحافظ على المصادر الاخرى. يجب ان يكون عندنا نظام مراقبه وانذار مبكر للجفاف والفيضانات، وله هذا تفاصيله. كمان في دايمنشن اللي هو موضوع الديزاستر، الحد من مخاطر الكوارث ومنع المساهمات المحدده وطنيا والامن المناخي هي قضيه امنيه. سبق انه احنا التزمنا اللي هو بموجب الان دي سي السابقه اللي تم اصدارها سنه 2015 ب 14% ريدكشن، بس ان شاء الله في عندنا تحديث هذا العام 2021 راح يكون في عندنا التزام جديد ومتفائل اكثر بما يتماشى مع التوجهات العالميه. وان شاء الله يعني انا شخصيا كامين عام لهذه الوزاره راح اعمل على مضاعفه هذا الالتزام اللي تم الالتزام فيه اللي هو سنه 2015، طبعا بوجود كافه الشركاء المحليين والدوليين اللي نتامل انهم يعني يدعمونا دائما لتحقيق اهداف طموحه للحد من ظاهره التغير المناخي. موضوع النهج المتكامل كمان اللي هي من احد رؤانا للحد من هذه الظاهره والمتعدد. Thank you very much. This is the شكرا لكم اللي هي بالفعل انا يعني شرفت على الانتهاء، مشكورين جدا. واحنا اذا في اي تساؤل بامكانكم تتواصلوا معنا. احنا يعني مره ثانيه بنشكركم وبنتامل انه نحد من هذه الظاهره ومن خطورتها وتاثيرها على الامن القومي بشكل عام وعلى الامن المناخي. مشكورين، شكرا.
Thank you so much, Dr. Khashashne. And I do apologize for having to cut you off, but I think the information you shared, especially this last slide and the previous one where you talked about the interlinkages of the issues are very important for the agenda. And you also, I think you were also referring to at some point in your presentation, and maybe it was in the last slide, that we need to shift from crisis response to more prevention. So really being proactive in those efforts. So thank you. And again, I would invite all the participants to raise any specific questions in the chat box. I think there's already one or two that are addressed to you, Dr. Khashashne. We've now had a chance to hear about some of the national responses. I would now like to invite a regional perspective, which will be shared with us by the colleagues at the Arab Water Council. Dr. Tariq El Saman and Engineer Heba El Hariri will be presenting this jointly. Dr. Tariq is a member on
Sorry, colleagues, it appears that Ms. Sujala was disconnected. Dr. Tariq is the board member of the Arab Water Council. Engineer Hiba is the Deputy Technical Director of the Arab Water Council. The floor is yours for the presentations. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, everyone. صباح الخير. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السيدات والسادة الحضور، في البداية نيابة عن المجلس العربي للمياه أود أن أشكر المنظمين على الدعوة الكريمة لعرض التفاصيل الخاصة بشبكة الأمن المناخي الإقليمية، والتي تم إطلاقها في ديسمبر 2020 من قبل المجلس العربي للمياه وجامعة الدول العربية. ويسعدني أن أقوم بتقديم هذا العرض بالاشتراك مع الدكتور طارق السمان خبير المياه وعضو مجلس المحافظين، بغرض تسليط الضوء على بعض الجهود الإقليمية لإدراج مفهوم الأمن المناخي في الخطط التنموية في المنطقة العربية. Yeah, for some reason I can't move my slides. Yeah. I still can't, Anas.
Just give me a second. Let me try and open the presentation from my end.
While we're waiting for the presentation, I should mention that all our panelists' very extensive experience and professional backgrounds are included in the biographies, which you should have received. So please do have a look at that on your own time. And I believe the presentation is working now, hopefully. So back over to you.
I'm controlling the presentation. So
next,
if you just guide me through the presentation, I will flip the slides. Go ahead, please.
الحقيقة قد جاءت أهمية فكرة إطلاق شبكة المناخ من الحاجة لتسليط الضوء على مفهوم أو مصطلح الأمن المناخي وكيفية تطبيقه وإدراجه في الخطط التنموية والدولية، وكذلك الحاجة الملحة إلى تعميق مفهوم الترابط أو النكسس بين المناخ وتأثيره على القطاعات المختلفة من خلال عمل منصة عربية إقليمية تسعى إلى تعزيز التعاون والدعم بين الدول والشركاء لتطبيق هذا المفهوم بصورة عملية. Next.
ولتحقيق ذلك فقد اهتم مشروع مرفق المناخ من أجل تطبيق أهداف التنمية المستدامة من أجل تحقيق الأمن الإنساني في الدول العربية، والممول من سيدا بدعم إجراء حوار إقليمي بين الشركاء، والذي قام بتنظيمه المجلس العربي للمياه وجامعة الدول العربية والمنظمات الأممية على مدار 3 أيام خلال شهر ديسمبر 2020 تحت عنوان وضع إطار أمن مناخي متكامل للمنطقة العربية. Next, please. وقد شارك في هذا الحوار 73 مشارك من الجهات الحكومية والغير حكومية والباحثين والأكاديميين ممثلين لعدد 14 دولة عربية و5 دول غير عربية والمنظمات الدولية والمجتمع المدني. وتضمن الحوار عددا من العروض الإقليمية والدولية عن التحديات والتطبيقات الخاصة بتغير المناخ، وكذلك تضمن عددا من مجموعات العمل التفاعلية. وجميع فعاليات الحوار متاحة على موقع الحوار الإقليمي المعروضة على الشاشة على سيادتكم. Next, please. وقد اهتم الحوار بالعمل التشاركي للمشاركين من خلال تقسيمهم إلى 4 مجموعات عمل تضمنت المجموعة الأولى أمن المناخ وأهمية المياه، الثانية أمن المناخ والأمن الغذائي، الثالثة أمن المناخ وأمن الطاقة، الرابعة الأمن المناخي والترابط الاجتماعي والمساواة بين الجنسين. قد قامت كل مجموعة بتقييم الأبعاد الفنية والمؤسسية والسياسية للأمن المناخي على حسب الموضوع المختص بمناقشته بمجموعة العمل للوصول إلى الرؤية والتحديات والأهداف الاستراتيجية والأنشطة المطلوبة. نيكست.
وخلال جلسات الحوار الحقيقة تم تعريف مصطلح الأمن المناخي للمنطقة بكونه مفهوم متطور بيسعى إلى توضيح وتعميق فهم تأثيرات المجتمع لتغير المناخ وانعكاساتها على الموارد الطبيعية والنظم البيئية والتنمية الاجتماعية والاقتصادية وكذلك الاستقرار السياسي. وكذلك تم التأكيد على أن تغير المناخ بيمثل عامل مضاعف للمخاطر والذي قد يسبب في تفاقم الاضطرابات السياسية والعرقية والدينية والطبقية مؤثرا على الأمن القومي للشعوب وبخاصة على الفئات الضعيفة، مما بيتطلب بذل جهود متكاملة لمحاولات التكيف وللتخفيف من آثار تغير المناخ على القطاعات المختلفة. Next please. خلال جلسات الحوار تم أيضا اقتراح رؤية عربية لإدراج الأمن المناخي في خطط التنمية في المنطقة العربية بحلول 2030 وقمنا بالتركيز في هذه الرؤية على محاولة تفعيل البيئة التمكينية التي ستمكن صناع القرار وأصحاب المصلحة ومجتمع البحث العلمي بالعمل بشكل استباقي مع التعقيدات الناشئة عن تغير المناخ وكذلك وضع خطط تكيف وإدراجها بشكل مسبق في خطط التنمية لتحقيق الاستقرار الإقليمي والاستدامة. Next.
وقد قام كل من المجلس العربي للمياه وجامعة الدول العربية والمنظمات الأممية بدعم من سيدا بالإعلان عن إطلاق شبكة الأمن المناخي الإقليمية للمنطقة العربية، وموقع الشبكة موضح على الشاشة. Next please. وتضمن أهداف الشبكة النقاط التالية: تعزيز أسلوب الأمن المناخي الإقليمي للمنطقة العربية على أن يكون هذا الأسلوب متكامل ومتعدد التخصصات وقائم على التفكير المترابط مع الاهتمام برفع مستوى الوعي حول الجوانب الاجتماعية والاقتصادية والمساواة بين الجنسين والتماسك الاجتماعي للآثار والكوارث المتعلقة بتغير المناخ. والهدف الثاني هو مشاركة البيانات ودعم وتقديم ابتكارات التحول الرقمي، ويتم ذلك من خلال الاهتمام بتعزيز المعرفة والوعي بالأمن المناخي من خلال دعم البحث وجمع المعلومات ومشاركتها بناء على أحدث المنهجيات والتحول الرقمي. والهدف الثالث للشبكة هو تنمية القدرات من خلال تطوير القدرات بين مختلف أصحاب المصلحة في المنطقة العربية لبناء مفاهيم ولغات جديدة للأمن المناخي والاهتمام ببناء القيادات الإقليمية النسائية المتخصصة في مجال الأمن المناخي. والهدف الرابع هو تعزيز التعاون والشراكات من خلال تجميع المستفيدين لمواجهة تحديات الأمن المناخي بشكل مشترك وبطرق مبتكرة مع توليد ثقافة إقليمية للمشاركة والتعاون والدعم المتبادل. Next. واقترح هيكل مؤقت للشبكة يتكون من اللجنة التوجيهية واللجنة الاستشارية ومنسق مجموعات العمل وأربع مجموعات عمل قابلين للزيادة. ومن مهام اللجنة التوجيهية وتقديم التوجيه لتطوير الأهداف الاستراتيجية للشبكة وتحسين السياسات للاستجابة لتغير المناخ. إما اللجنة الاستشارية فتهتم بتقديم الاستشارات الفنية والعلمية والتقييم الإقليمي للسياسات الحالية وخطط التنمية طويلة الأجل لتحسين أداء مهام الشبكة. ومن مهام منسق مجموعات العمل هو التنسيق الأنشطة الشبكة فيما يتعلق بمشاركة البيانات والتحقق من صحة النتائج والمشاركة في الدراسات الفنية. إما مجموعات العمل فمقترح في البداية أن تكون 4 مجموعات عمل، وهم أمن المناخ وأهمية المياه، والثانية أمن المناخ والأمن الغذائي، والثالثة أمن المناخ وأمن الطاقة، والرابعة الأمن المناخي والترابط الاجتماعي والمساواة بين الجنسين. وهذه المجموعات الأربعة قابلة للزيادة في المستقبل على حسب الاحتياج. Next please.
وستتركز الحقيقة الشبكة على تعزيز الاتفاق أو الترابط ما بين تنفيذ أهداف التنمية المستدامة، وكذلك تنفيذ أهداف اتفاق باريس بشأن تغير المناخ، وكذلك إطار سنداي للحد من الكوارث. Next please. وسيتم تحقيق ذلك من خلال دعم وضع أطر سياسية متكاملة لربط مفهوم الأمن المناخي وانعكاسه على تحقيق أهداف التنمية المستدامة، وكذلك تعزيز التخطيط التشاركي والشراكات وتوسيع نطاق التعاون الإقليمي، وكذلك تعزيز البحوث متعددة التخصصات في محاولة يمكن لتحسين فهم المخاطر متعددة الأبعاد، وكذلك زيادة التدريب فيما يختص بكيفية ربط وتحسين فهم أثر المشاكل البيئية وانعكاساتها على القضايا الاقتصادية والاجتماعية، وكذلك تعزيز التحول الرقمي وتعزيز الوصول إلى التمويل المستدام لتنفيذ مشاريع التكيف. في آخر سلايد أحب أقول next please. إنه جميع هذه المقترحات وهذه التوصيات سيتم إدراجها ومناقشتها بشكل موسع في التقرير العربي الأول للأمن المناخي، والذي سيتم إصداره من قبل المجلس العربي للمياه في الأيام القادمة. الحقيقة أنا بدعو جميع المهتمين والعنيين في هذا الملف الهام بالاشتراك في الشبكة حتى يستطيعوا الوصول إلى أحدث التقارير والإصدارات الصادرة، وحتى تتاح لهم فرصة للاشتراك في الأنشطة الإقليمية وكذلك فرق البحث المشتركة التي سيتم تشكيلها من خلال هذه الشبكة لتعظيم الاستفادة من الخبرات العربية في منطقتنا نحو مستقبل عربي آمن ومستدام. شكرا لكم، وبعتذر مرة تانية على مشكلة البرزنتيشن. سجالة over to you.
Thank you, Heba and Dr. Tariq, for this very concise presentation, but really so rich in content. I think, you know, it's very significant that the agenda of climate security, which is still relatively new, is being steered at the regional level through the various collaborations that you have excuse me, that you have mentioned today. And it is also important to inform this agenda from the regional priorities and regional perspectives. And I think we should, for all of us who are here on this session today, I think the invitation to join the network is really an important one. And I do encourage, on behalf of my colleagues at AWC, to please have a look at this really rich resource in terms of this very important agenda. Given I'm keeping an eye out on the time, and given that we are running a little bit behind, I would like to go straight into the next presentation, which will bring specific sort of thematic angles into the discussions around climate security. And first, I am pleased to welcome Ms. Yasmin Mustafa, who is currently the Knowledge Management Officer at the UN Habitat Regional Office in Cairo. Yasmin, over to you, please.
Thank you so much, Sujala. Can you please confirm that you see the presentation?
Yes, we do.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for taking the time to join us in today's session. I will be sharing with you a brief presentation on what UN Habitat is doing to support sustainable recovery and reconstruction in the Arab region in the context of the SDG Climate Security Nexus. So, in the beginning, just to give you some key urban facts and figures from the region, the Arab region is rapidly urbanizing, and today we have almost 56% of its total population living in cities and urban areas, and this percentage is expected to reach 75% by 2050. So this concentration of populations and socioeconomic activities is increasing the exposure of people to different kinds of risks and shocks and stresses, and is also causing numerous challenges, including the growth of informal settlements, as we have today over 80 million people living in informal areas that are often unsafe and lacking basic urban services. Also, the urban population is becoming more and more exposed to climatic risks, as we have heard today from the distinguished speakers, and also from the interactive part of the session from the participants. And also in the context of the ongoing conflicts and protracted crises in the region, millions of people are in dire need of humanitarian assistance. And this has also some severe implications on the, as it's damaging and destroying the built environment and the infrastructure. So, sorry, I heard an echo. Okay.
Yes, you're clear now. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So the urban conflicts are often interlinked with unmanaged urban growth, sprawl of informal settlements, and it's also contributing to poverty, to fragility, and failure to integrate different identities. This is also worsened by poor urban planning and poor policies, and which ultimately lead to and weakens local urban governance. So as a regional response to all these challenges, UN Habitat is working on several streams, including the work on supporting sustainable and evidence-based development policies in conflict-affected cities. And this is why the urban recovery framework was introduced and designed as an enabling institutional and policy framework to guide post-conflict and post-disaster recovery that is resilient and sustainable and based on principles of building peace and building back better. And this framework looks at the immediate response to the challenge and also the longer term adaptive and transformative measures, taking into consideration the pre-disaster vulnerabilities and the current situation and the current needs and gaps. And based on that, it puts forward priorities of recovery. So this framework also takes into consideration the local context of cities and the local dynamics, and it covers the main 7 pillars that you can see on the screen. So UN Habitat has also extensively worked on urban profiling in several conflict and disaster affected cities across the region. And urban profiling is, it's a tool, it's a multi-sectoral and analytical and diagnostic tool to better inform recovery and building back better by providing comprehensive data on the impact of the crisis on cities. And it also helps in identifying high impact interventions that can accelerate recovery. And one of the main pillars of the urban profiling is the environment pillar, and it mainly aims at answering key questions of what is the impact of the crisis on the environment, what are the main climate stressors that are likely to affect the city, and what is the current government's capacity to manage these environmental challenges. These are some examples of the type of data that is being used in urban profiling. So the map on the left is, it shows flood scenarios in Aden in Yemen. And the one on the right, it shows a mapping of the damage and destruction to the physical infrastructure and also the housing rehabilitation in Sinjar, Iraq. Another area in which we have been working extensively in is developing guidelines for green recovery, reconstruction, and regeneration in the Arab region. And this is done under the framework of the SDG-Climate Facility project. And we're working on that in collaboration with our partners from the World Green Building Council. And the main aim of these guidelines is to support mainstreaming climate resilience in the different stages of recovery, and also to seize the opportunity of post-disaster and post-conflict recovery to build back better and greener and apply principles of affordability, resilience, and sustainability. And the guidelines is designed in a way that the main stakeholders that we target by these guidelines are national and local governments, but it's also could be used by other stakeholders like NGOs and CSOs, private sector entities, and different practitioners and researchers in the region. The guidelines mainly cover the 6 thematic areas that you see on the right side of the screen, and they tackle different stages of recovery from the early assessment to the planning, and also in some cases to the construction phase. And we are currently working on finalizing the guidelines, and hopefully it would be ready for publishing before the end of the year. Thank you so much, and over to you, Sujala.
Yasmin, thank you so much for this overview and reminding us that when we talk about climate security challenges, they are manifest also in urban settings, and we know that the rate of urbanization is increasing at a phenomenal pace. So it's a very important dimension for us to remember as we discuss this issue, and great to see that regional responses are taking shape as well. I would now like to invite another country perspective, but on a very kind of specific area of the link between disaster risk and climate change, which is probably one of the first correlations that we make when we talk about climate change impacts. And I'm delighted to welcome Mr. Zahi Shihan, currently the head of the disaster risk management at the presidency of the Council of Ministers in Lebanon. Mr. Zahi Shihan, the floor is yours, and we will control the presentation from our end as you have requested.
Not sure. Okay. So first of all, good morning and welcome everyone, and thank you for this delightful forum. My name is Zahi Shihan. I'm the head of Disaster Risk Management Unit at the Presidency of the Council of Ministers. And this is a true pleasure to be here with you today in this special session of the Arab Forum for Sustainable Development. Today, I will be presenting on Arab Forum for Disaster Risk Reduction, which is convened by the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, UNDRR. The UNDRR is the custodian of the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction 2015 and 2030, which provides member states with concrete action to protect development gains for the risk of disasters. If I can move to slide 2, please. The Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, the Climate Agreement, and Agenda 2030 Sustainable Development Goals have already recognized and embraced the disaster risk management approach, recognizing the complexity of risk and its interconnectedness across systems, an integrated system risk governance approach, moving from multidisciplinary to interdisciplinary approaches. The focus has to move from managing disasters and threats, protecting all development paradigm against external threats, to managing risk inside development. Disaster risk and climate change are both dependent variables of development. Therefore, risk management cuts across and aligns all three frameworks: DRR, sustainable development, and climate change. An integrated risk governance approach should take into consideration the climate change concerns and climate-related risks. It should be noted that a lack of integration of climate change concerns and measures are likely to exacerbate in the future climate change related risks. Sorry, I'm just trying to see if I'm talking too fast. Risk management now has to become not an add-on to needs to be mainstreamed into development, but a set of practices embedded in its very DNA. Three approaches to DRM: preventing and avoiding new risks, reducing existing risks, and resilience needs to be combined in appropriate strategies. If I can move to the third slide, please. This diagram shows the direct interrelation between the 7 global targets of the Sendai framework and the SDGs target. 3 are highlighted here. Eradication of poverty, sustainable cities and communities, and action on climate. And therefore, DRR is a central part of sustainable development, where disasters can hinder decades of progress and programs and development. The 17 SDGs are the core of the global policy document called Transforming Our World, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, which sets out a transformative plan of action for people, planet, and prosperity that all countries and all stakeholders will implement. Highlights the needs for disaster risk reduction across a number of sectors, in line with the understanding that disaster risk reduction is cross-cutting and requires a multi-sectoral approach. Calls for revitalized global partnership and Eco-Sendai frameworks call for building disaster risk reduction partnership across sectors and stakeholders, and implementing, the post 2015 international agreement. The implementation of the overall 2030 agenda represents an opportunity to reduce risks in a meaningful and coherent manner through intergovernmental processes, actions, and agreements. Here, but before this slide, the last point, the coherence between the various frameworks in climate risks and create additional man-made hazards, and that development gains. Better livelihoods and living standards are protected from the impact of disasters and climate change. If I can move to the fourth slide, please. In its guiding principle, the Sendai framework states that disaster risk reduction requires all of society engagement and partnership. It also requires empowerment and inclusive, accessible, and non-discriminatory participation, paying special attention to people disproportionately affected by disasters, especially the poorest. A gender, age, disability, and culture perspective should be integrated in all policies and practices, and women and youth leadership should be promoted. In this context, special attention should be paid to the improvement of organized voluntarily work of citizens. The stakeholders' engagement supports effort in environmental management for disaster risk reduction, climate change adaptation, and sustainable livelihoods. It promotes ecosystems management as the key strategy to reduce disaster risk, increase local resilience, and adapt to change climate. In future knowledges that while states have the overall responsibility for reducing the disaster risk, it is shared responsibility between governments and relevant stakeholders. Believing in this shared responsibility, UNDRR Roads has established a multi-stakeholder forum for disaster risk reduction, as the Arab Partnership Meeting for Disaster Risk Reduction. Partnership meeting proved to be an effective tool to periodically assess progress and implementation and share practice and knowledge on disaster risk, informed policies, programs, and investments, including on development and climate issues. With the support of the UNDRR Roads, the Arab region has a total of 5 voluntary regional major stakeholders groups with an overarching goal of supporting national governments governments in the region in implementing the Sendai framework in coherence with the other global frameworks. These groups are the Arab Science and Technology Advisory Group, the Arab Gender Equality and Women Empowerment Group, the Arab Red Crescent National Society Group, the Arab Disaster Risk Reduction Children and Youth Group, the Arab Disaster Risk Reduction Civil Society Group. The main takeaway in that building resilience and promoting disaster risk reduction is a collective responsibility and change with calls for coordinated actions and partnership forums bring together a variety of stakeholders towards a global and comprehensive effort in support all country level actions. Coherence between the agendas is more than a motto. It is necessity to address the major global challenges, both present and future. Taken together, these frameworks make for a more complete resilience agenda, as building resilience requires action spanning development, humanitarian, climate, and disaster risk reduction areas. This coherence will serve to strengthen existing risk fragility and resilience frameworks for multi-hazard assessments and aim to develop a dynamic, local, preventive, and adaptive urban governance system at the global, national, and local level. Raising the awareness with national and subnational governments on how the different frameworks align is critical. The relative political weight of framework may affect collaboration and coherence. Facilitating key partnership will help avoid duplication and maximize gains. Institutional incentives to work together may also be required to reinforce joint working across agreements. Joint monitoring processes with track progress on implementation of the frameworks. This will also help minimize the reporting burden on countries, making data collection achievable. Ensuring national ownership and leadership on all of these frameworks will also be fundamental to success. An all-of-society approach has a benefit, complementaries between government and stakeholders for collective results, identifying and aligning key priorities for coherent implementation of disaster risk reduction, climate change, adaptation, and sustainable development, providing an overview of capacities, roles, and initiatives to enhance the understanding and collaboration and reduce duplication of effort and resources among different actors, bridging the science policy, bridging the science and policy divide, enabling behavior change to take place at local and community levels. Having this in mind, the spirit of the Arab Partnership meeting for DRR is to take stock of knowledge and updates by governments, stakeholders, and partners on the implementation of the Sendai framework for DRR and the Arab strategy for DRR, noting that the implementation of the Sendai framework is coherent with other major agendas. The Arab Partnership for DRR also opened the floor for climate change solutions, concern, and best practices to be discussed. And this is fundamental to keep this mechanism active and thriving to help inform discussion at all levels and all stakeholders. Thank you very much, and I'm over from my side.
Thank you so much, Mr. Shaheen, for this very important link that that you highlighted with the disaster risk reduction agenda, which is so closely linked to climate change impacts. Thank you also for really emphasizing the different sort of groups that we need to look at in the spirit of leaving no one behind, including women, including community individuals with various abilities. I think that's an important dimension for us to remember. Now, I realize we're nearing the end of the allotted time, but I hope most of you can still stay for an additional 10 or 15 minutes, because we do have one more interactive exercise before we move into our two very last speakers, who are going to talk to us about where is the money going to come from? Because a lot of what we're talking about is great. You're having some policies in place, regional initiatives are taking shape, but what will it all mean without the resources? So we will hear about that, but before going into those last two very quick snapshots, I will ask Tina to please share the link of this next interactive exercise again, where we would like to get your perspectives on who should be leading, who are some of the main actors that should be leading some of these efforts. So please have a look in the chat box. The link has been posted there. We invite you to click on there, respond to the questions, and then we will continue for the last 10 minutes of this morning's session.
So you can access the poll either through the link or through the code. Some people had requested the code, so I've posted that as well this time.
I'm going to wait for half a minute more. The responses are coming in. It's interesting to see the bar moving. So as in the first exercise that we did, please do continue to respond if you're still working through that. What we wanted to sort of convey through this exercise is that there are multiple and very diverse set of actors that probably have a role in really mainstreaming climate security considerations in, in the kind of work that we're doing in terms of progress being made towards the SDGs, policies, planning, programming. All of these are reliant on very many different actors. One type of entity will really not be able to take on the load and the kind of nor would anyone have necessarily all the required expertise to contribute to this very complex and integrated agenda. So the idea behind this is that to show not just development partners, for instance, as one block, but really that there are multiple dimensions, there are different layers that need to be unpacked if we want to make further progress in this area. And And I see that private sector and private investment is a little bit above average there. It does have a very important role to play. And I think this is a great segue to introduce to you our last two speakers who have 5 minutes each. So please do stay with us. I would now like to invite Ms. Nuran Atif, who is currently the project coordinator with UNEP Finance Initiative, who will help us understand a little bit about the sustainable finance world. So over to you, Nuran. You have 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Sajala, so much for your words. And it is a pleasure to participate in this panel among distinguished experts. I would like to first start with a quick introduction to UNEP-FI and its role in the SDG-Climate Facility project. UNEP-FI is a global partnership between the UN and the financial sector, covering its three arms: the banking, the insurance, and the investment. Worldwide, we have over 350 financial institutions, and we work together to help set industry-based principles. Very briefly, UNEP-FI's role in this project is to scale up climate finance and partnerships in the region. I'm going to be presenting the study that Dr. Nada referred to in her opening remarks, which will be officially launched at the Expo as mentioned. I will be providing a very brief snapshot on it. So the reason why this report was developed is to provide market intelligence, especially with the scarcity of available information on the issue in the region. It also to increase the financial institutions' knowledge and fill knowledge gaps on the impacts of climate finance on financial health. This was also coupled with recognizing the importance of sustainable finance in general and climate finance in particular to one of the most susceptible regions in the world to climate change impact, as we saw from and presented from previous speakers as well. The SDGs financing gaps is estimated to be at least $230 billion annually. And this is why it is important to enhance the role of the financial system in the region to bridge this gap. This report was developed with generous support of the League of Arab States, the Ford Foundation, and the UN Development Program under the SDG Climate Facility project. The study assesses sustainable financing in Egypt, Jordan, Morocco, Bahrain, and the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia, as well as provides an assessment of the climate financing situation in Egypt, Jordan, Tunisia, and Iraq. The report provides an in-depth analysis on the barriers to sustainable and climate finance in the region, and also highlights the readiness of the Arab financial system to transform into more environmentally friendly economies. It also showcases good case practices, as well as provides a detailed SWOT analysis of the financial scene in the region that is followed by a set of policy recommendations. So let's dive directly into the SWOT analysis, looking at the strengths. Although the 6 countries are at varying stages of progress in aligning national financial systems with sustainable development needs and goals, all 6 countries previously mentioned have developed guidelines on social services and participated in preparing reports on sustainability. They have also worked to promote sustainable financing through awareness campaigns and education initiatives, with the exception of Saudi Arabia. The banking system in the region shows stability and development, and the role of financial supervisory and regulatory authority in the region has strengthened. Also, the reforms undertaken over the past decade focus on restructuring through mergers and acquisitions, injecting capital to raise financial institutions' capital adequacy ratios, and cleaning of balance sheets as well. So there is an overall positive outlook in the general financial system in the region. Looking at the weaknesses, it was found that there are no explicit climate-specific financial regulations and no enforcement of environmental, social, and governance guidelines in general in some Arab countries. Also, there is an absence of skills and expertise from the scene, including lawyers, accountants, and data providers, so beyond even the financial providers themselves, to integrate sustainable and climate finance in the financial system. This is also coupled by the issue that sustainable and climate finance are still being viewed to an extent as charitable causes rather than a standing business case in the finance sector on its own. All this combines also leads to the increase in exposure to operational risks that result from lack of understanding of environmental and social and climate risks in general. I cannot move screens. Okay. So looking also at the opportunities that are available in the region, there is a great opportunity to build on the existing momentum of the current reforms that have been happening and the steady progress towards establishing a more inclusive financial sector and a cashless economy as well. The promotion of financial inclusion improves the access to finance among the most vulnerable groups and is a gateway to new products and services. Arab countries are also aiming to increase private sector engagement in greening their economies. This is an opportunity for the finance sector to support by extending credit and developing new tools and services that capitalize on sustainable and climate change related opportunities. In the end, we can see that the threats to the financial sector mostly arise from the physical and transition climate change related risks, with ensuing costs to the stability of the system and economy as a whole. This is in addition, of course, to the operational and systemic risks which result as well. So the takeaway from all this is, and based also on the analysis of the data presented, we have a global set of recommendations which touch on the issue in the region that and there is a recurring voice that there is a need for more legislative engagement. And this includes enacting financial regulations related to climate change, such as having mandatory reporting on environmental, social, and governance, as well as adopting mandatory sustainability lending practices, and also the usage of sustainable finance metrics, definitions, and standards that can help in identifying and financing the green investment opportunities. We also have providing incentives through central banks and regulators, such as preferential rates. That is to encourage also the transition to resilient green economies. We also have raising the level of national preparedness to confront climate change and finance. And this can be by strengthening the institutional capacities of the national implementing agencies themselves. And also this would improve the access of national entities to the financial resources available in climate funds, as well as in financial institutions, and thus creating more room for private sector participation. Finally, to improve the coordination between various stakeholders, including government entities, financial sector regulators, financial institutions, and investors. And of course, all this calls for promoting cultural change through a comprehensive educational training and awareness campaign in order to achieve this. In the end, I would also like to share that this report enabled us at UNEP-FI to shape our own activities and the workshops we conducted under this project, the SDG-Climate Facility project, and acted to serve the purpose of this report. However, the report can be useful beyond UNEP-FI to decision makers, governments, regulators, etc. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nuran. I think this is really a very useful overview that you gave, and quite a shift in terms of where this discussion needs to head as well. In addition to looking at the substantive issues, really the financing is very important. I like particularly one of the recommendations or the findings where you mentioned that, how do we make the shift happen from an add-on or a charitable cause to something that makes business sense as well? I think that will really be an important question for us to address. And that brings us to it's a great connection to the final presentation, the last but definitely not the least, where my colleague Dustin Shin will be speaking now. He is currently the Regional Climate Change Specialist at the UNDP Regional Bureau of Arab States, and he will be speaking of kind of the way forward in addressing some of these issues. So Dustin, over to you, please.
Thank you, Sujala. And I will be very brief. You can see it's just a handful of slides on the Arab Climate and Resilience Investment Forum, where UNDP and the SDG Climate Facility project has partnered currently with CIVAS and is exploring potential partnerships with some other organizations as well, to really try to catalyze the private sector, private capital for climate security and climate adaptation more broadly in the Arab states. As you have heard from my colleagues, climate impacts and climate security have both a downside as well as an upside. Taking advantage of the upside and the growing need for business models, technologies, and investments that really help countries manage climate change risks and climate security risks and to reduce potential losses. This forum tries to bring together a number of actors that I will go into on the next slide to really catalyze private capital for this purpose. And so the forum's objectives is to provide an open platform for bankable projects and companies in the Arab states to really pitch their business models and investment opportunities as they relate to climate security, meet potential investors, and exchange new ideas with peers and stakeholders. Participants would include private investors from the region and also internationally, early and growth stage SMEs in particular that have relevant products and services for climate security, as well as traditional donors and development finance institutions. The SDG Climate Facility Project, Climate Action for Human Security, is supporting the development of a bankable pipeline of potential investment opportunities in these sectors. You can see a number of sectors that are eligible to be presented in the forum, including water resources management. You have seen in the very beginning of the session today that water resources management and agriculture have crystallized themselves as the most important sectors when it comes to climate change impacts in the region. So therefore, there should also be a growing need for technology, for services, business models that help countries and communities to adapt to these climate impacts in water resources sector. The same is true for waste management, small-scale off-grid renewable energy, centralized renewable energy, climate smart agriculture, sustainable housing for refugees and internally displaced people, as well as climate intelligence, weather monitoring, and early warning. In addition to these sectors, we would also be supporting digitalization of all of these and more traditional sectors as well. So in that sense, the forum is really aiming to bring together different partners to make deals possible, investment deals that make sense both from an impact perspective, helping countries and people adapt to climate impacts, but also make sense from a business perspective, as that is necessary to really catalyze the trillions of dollars that is needed to address the issue at hand. That's it from my side. You will be hearing more about this forum in the future as we are in the initial stage of the design and development. The forum is tentatively scheduled to take place in December of this year, pending the easing of travel restrictions from Corona. So we will keep you posted on the details as we progress. Thanks very much, and back to Sujala.
Destin, thank you so much. I think this is a great note to end on because it helps to bring together many of the different sort of themes, issues, actors that we've been talking about throughout the session today. So thank you very much. I think there's a few questions for both you and Nuran in the chat box. So if you could have a look at those while I try to bring this session to a close. First of all, thank you for staying as long as you have. But I think you can see from the breadth of information that has been shared today that there is a huge amount of work taking place on the issue of climate security. We talked about conflict, we talked about food, we talked about water, livelihoods, gender, displacement. And the climate security angle really helps us to bring these dimensions together with the impacts of climate change, and enable us to do a type of integrated analysis that is required. I think that's a first, an important takeaway, at least from my side. Now, in order to do this, to move forward on the agenda, multiple actors, but enabling the coherence among the different types of knowledge, expertise, data that is being produced is really going to be the next sort of challenge in really in coming up with integrated responses that are required to address these multidimensional perspectives. And what that means is partnerships and collaboration are really going to be at the core of the efforts that we are trying to make. I think the fact that we had such a diverse set of participants today as well in this session shows us that there is huge interest and huge amounts of work being done, not only from the speakers that we heard today, but also I know from some of you who are here on the in the session today that there is a lot more going on. We also, of course, importantly talked about the financing, which I think is essential to remember and essential to put really at the center of responses that we do, whether it is to invest in research and analysis, whether it is to invest in data, and of course, importantly, to invest in the initiatives that will actually start making a change on the ground. And that can only happen through increased investments, both through public and private resources that bring about changes in the livelihood opportunities of people, that minimize displacement, that enable us to have more responsive planning in rural and urban contexts, in fragile as well as countries that are still making strides towards achieving their SDGs. So with that, I would like to conclude today, and thanks to all the extremely powerful presentations that we heard, the breadth of perspectives, you know, hearing from countries, from regional actors, from UN agencies, I think really was a great contribution to the debate. As you know, we will be extracting a few recommendations once we go back to also to your responses, which have been an important part of the discussion, the questions that you've raised, which will then be shared as inputs in the final report that will be produced as an outcome of the Arab Forum for Sustainable Development. So thank you once again. I wish you all a very pleasant rest of your day. And we will stay in touch with you to follow up with presentations and any other questions that you might have to any of us here today. Thank you once again, and take care. Bye-bye.